So good afternoon, morning, whatever time you're watching this little webinar video of the 3D Print Doctor with me, Greg. Hoping you're all well and enjoying yourself. Quick welcome to country and recognise all Indigenous people that may be watching here today and respect elders past, present and coming in the future, and hope that you're all enjoying watching this, and hopefully you can find something to do with 3D printing relating to everything that is going on in your school, etc., and in your region. So today we're going to have a look at those niggly little things that why doesn't this print, why is this not working, etc., etc. We're going to try and do it all with only a couple of cameras, the main one off the MLD that I'm using, and another camera that you can probably just see off to your left, and work through the sorts of things that you may or may not be having problems with. Most of these have come from incidences where I've had schools get in touch with the STEM.T4L team when they've had some issues with either the inventor, or mainly we're looking at the FlashForger Ventura 4, and the solutions that we've actually put into place to make sure that we actually can get those schools using those printers as soon as possible. And there's a number of funny little things that can happen just in the transport. At this point in time, I think we've only had one dead on arrival printer out at Cherrybrook, and we got a return on that one and got that fixed up quite quickly, and then got them printing and they're off and running. And there was one other little niggle that I'm going to get to towards the end of this. So I'm going to hopefully get through everything. Now, one of the interesting things, I'm going to have a look, I'm going to share a file, I'm going to try and get through all of my bits and pieces here today, and I want to show you this particular image. Go away. Let me bring it into play. Okay, so this is an image of I'll get rid of this. This is an image of a build plate which had a print start on it, and the teacher has tried to clean it. So they're doing all the right things here. What I'm seeing here, though, they could not get the print object off the print plate. And this can be something, I have actually experienced this with the FlashForge print bed, the magnetic flexible one, and it can stick really, 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 really well. Too well, for example. Now, how do you get these off when they're doing that? One of the things that will help you is remove the print object when the print bed is hot. So you can preheat it. There is an option in the menus that allows you to do that. That will help soften the bond between them, but repeated heating will actually, to a certain extent, increase the bond as well. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword in that respect. But if you can heat up the object, or when it finishes, get it off nice and quickly, that is when your print will come off easier. What are the reasons why your print can stick so well that it makes it too difficult to get off? Weirdly, because I keep harping on this, you're looking at levelling and the distance away that your nozzle is from the print bed. Levelling is super, super important, but one thing that I think causes this, and I have kind of experienced it, is if the print nozzle is too close, it really pushes the fluidized filament into the bed so well that it almost bonds to it, making it too hard to get off. So if you are experiencing print objects that are really sticking to the print bed just too well, you may be getting your leveling for the nozzle a little bit too close. Now, how do you adjust that? What you might be experiencing is when you're using your little leveling tool, and let me stop the screen sharing on this. Right, so when you're using your little leveling tool, you may have too much pressure. It's a really small amount. It's just the tiniest little bit of resistance that you should be feeling when you slide this between the nozzle and the build plate. If it feels really, really firm, it'll be too close. It's sort of just touching. This is pretty close to the distance you should be off. If you want to throw a micrometer on that, I think it's 0.1 or 0.2 of a millimetre clearance. So that gives you the ability to get the filament to roll out like a bit of toothpaste if you were squeezing it out of a toothpaste tube, and getting a nice little roll, which is that first layer. The printer prints that slower. You will find that the head moves slower so that it can actually push it into the print bed. But if it pushes it in too hard, you then have those problems like you just saw, where you've got this print object sticking so well to the print bed, you can't get it off. So if you're experiencing it really sticking hard and you can't get them off, even when you pull it out, flex it, etc., and I'll just show you that again in a minute, how you can do that, you will find that it won't stick as badly if you get that really just fine. It should just feel like the tiniest bit of resistance over no resistance or grabbing it too much. You should just find it's just a really nice little tiny bit of resistance. It feels like a tiny little buzz vibration with your fingers if they're nice and sensitive. And I've got really insensitive fingers, and then if I can do it, hopefully anyone can. It's a kind of a little bit of an art. So if you end up with that position where it's having difficulty to go off, re-level the print bed and just make sure that you've got it a little bit higher. It still should be touching the little filament, the little guide, but just touching the little bit of the guide, and that will help those sorts of situations. Now, I'll go through that really, really quickly now. I'm going to swap over. That was a good spin on the spot, wasn't it? Let me change the camera over. And so here we've got the camera pointing to the Adventurer 4. We've just done a little print job on this, and it's on the print bed. Now, yes, I can go in here and I can try to remove it, and there's a good chance it might come off. But there is a good 40 millimetre square of surface area on the print bed. I'm trying to avoid having to re-level this printer between prints. I want to be able to just keep throwing prints at it. And that's the sort of thing that you're looking at trying to do at school. You don't want to be constantly leveling each time. And it will let you do that with a bit of luck. Now, I do have this pen here because, as I've said before, I've got fat fingers, so it makes it easier for me to hit the screen there. Take the print bed off and give it a flex. You'll hear it crack straight away. We've done this before, and then you should find it just falls off. And so it's a really nice, easy way to get it off. You've got all of that surface area on the bottom that's sticking. These last little dags you can just pull off. And if I can give you a good little shot at this, you'll notice that this print bed is starting to get a little bit of residue from previous prints. There's different coloured filament sticking there. There's also a few scrape marks because I have at times had to use the little scraping tool that comes with the unit. As long as it's relatively flat and smooth, I don't have a huge amount of problems. And there are times where these little dags, they're from really heavy sticking ones. Sometimes it just sticks on you. It's a little bit of a black art 3D printing. They will come off with another print at some point in time that prints over the top. It'll probably stick to the filament and you'll drag it off. You will get there. There is a life of these print beds. They do wear out. And when they do wear out, might I then go to the stage where you do consider buying a new one. They're $10. So they're relatively cheap. If it's one of your printers here, ring up the team and see if they've got some spares. There's another way when you've had a problem. You may have had one that's damaged. We replaced that one that was damaged with that one in the school. It was just those one-offs. Things happen. And start off with a new one. But yeah, I would get, this is one of my spares. I think this was my original spare on the first one. And this is another one I'm using now. The next stage that you get to is, what do you do with all the different types of print bed surfaces? And this is one of those things. Let me put this back in. Okay, making sure that it goes in nice and easily. Here's some interesting things. You can buy print bed replacement material, and it will have a sticky layer on the back that you can stick on. This is for a large guider printer. This is another different type of printer. Again, it's the surface that we use there. And then you have, for example, the Inventor. buy this plate. I think these are $5 or $6. These are dirt cheap if you can still get them. I would suggest you do that. The difficulty, though, if you decide to go the cheaper line and try and replace the print bed material on your magnetic board, is you get this. And I will admit straight up, I just gave up. I thought, this is too difficult. I'm dead sure I've got a spare sitting there. Luckily, I didn't. I just went in and got it. You can get this off. You have to get this off and then get rid of all the residue glue. You're using mineral terps, all sorts of things to get it off. It does stick like the proverbial to a blanket, so be very, very careful when you're mucking around with this stuff. A couple of people have suggested how do I make sure it sticks? And one of the things that I've said on the Adventurer 4, I'm finding isopropyl alcohol, strangely, is the tool that I use, because what I'm finding is you need to clean the surface. This one here is starting to get that oily grease from my fingers on it, and it will start to release way too early. And I'll show you a print that happened to me just today, just before I came down. Isopropyl alcohol is what I need to put on this particular print bed, the black one, to clean it so that it will stick. I have also shown you the 3D lac. This is really good stuff. It works in 90% of cases. I have found it's not great with this particular print bed on the Adventurer 4, isopropyl alcohol. There is also the dreaded glue stick. I hate using the glue stick. I did go out to a school, where was it? I forget where it was exactly, Hornsby Way it was. And they had an inventor that it wasn't sticking to. And it was amazing. When we pulled the print bed out of the printer, it was shiny. It was almost like a glossy car with the best Duco finish. It was so shiny that nothing was going to stick. And they had used it and it had worked, but there was a lot of what could only be a lot of grease on it or whatever it was. Somehow it had got really, really shiny. And when we were just going through and analysing it, something came up. The teacher went, yeah, that was something we tried. I think they tried to clean it with something and it just made it too shiny and smooth. Now, I didn't have any 3D lac with me on the day. I forgot to bring it out with me. I try to do that when I go out to a school. But they had a glue stick, and I put a very, very thin film of glue stick on that printer, threw it in, and straight away it was printing beautifully, and it stuck well. She was then going out and getting the 3D lac. If you do have a printer where you've used a lot of glue stick, and it used to be what we all used when we first started 3D printing, it will build up. Get it under a hot water tap and rinse that glue off. It's water soluble. It will come off. It will clean the bed, and you can get a lot of use out of a print bed that it has glue stick on it. But try and avoid the glue stick. This is a far better option. It is hairspray on steroids, great stuff. Stay away from the glue stick. That's going up the back of the pile because I don't want to. Last super resort. This used to be the stuff we all use, the 2-inch masking tape from Bunnings or whatever hardware store. This actually works quite well, and it used to be the go-to rather than a glass print bed. And glass print beds can be good, but they do. There's a bit of a hidden art in getting them to work well. If you use the 2-inch bed, like you've just run out of print bed material, you want to do a print because the kid's got to get it done for an industrial tech or some sort of job that they need to get done. Hi, Jason. Then you're in a position where you may find you need to, can I get you to turn your mic off, mate? Thank you. You might need to use some 2-inch tape, blue tape, if you've got it around. Now, this is the way, when you stick it down, make sure you stick it down and it's touching on the edges. Don't leave any gaps. What tends to happen, however, is it does stick really well. When you take your print job off, it will ruin this. So you're constantly putting this back on and off all the time. You may or may not have to use a little bit of assistance with something like 3D lac or a glue stick, but I would say this is last resort stuff if you've got to try and make your print stick to your bed and you're having troubles or you need a print bed to stick to. That basically covers everything with print bed adhesion, except that I will show you, because we've had instances, let me put that abomination up there. Oh, good, you can't see it. Here is a perfect example of a print. I was doing this today. that let go during the print. Now, that was basically the result. So I had a perfect print up to the point where it basically slipped out of it because there was not enough bed adhesion to hold it into place. I was doing an experiment with the new printer that I'm testing. I'm getting used to this particular build plate. It's the bane of my life, getting used to all the different print bed materials and what I can and cannot put on it. Currently, I've thrown a bit of 3D lac onto it and it looks like it's sticking really, really well. So all the things that I say, we've got to try things for the beds that we're actually using. So that is the typical example, let me move it so you can see it, of a print that has let go and then it starts just moving around with the print bed and you end up with this bunch of grape spaghetti on the top. If you can catch it early, and I got lucky, I only wasted about 1 metre of material, but in terms of the way this was printing, it was printing beautifully. But that is one of the things most frustrating, especially when it's so close to the end. It can be very, very annoying. That actually is a half-scale version of what was being printed there. I just went 50%. That was the interesting thing, that giving you a bit of an idea, this is a little side note. The two of those there are exactly the same object. This one was printed in our current Adventurer 4 using standard default settings to print it off, and I did use 8% fill, so I was just dropping it right down to get the speed up. That was going to take 2 hours and something to print this little object here. This is on the new Adventurer 4 Pro, and it was exactly the same settings. The time, if it had finished and hadn't let go, was just over 1 hour. So it took, twice the size, but took the same amount of time, 2 hours. So that's the difference you're looking at with the new Adventurer 4 Pro. I will be more than likely approving that very, very soon. And to give you a bit of an idea of what it is printing like, I'll give you a close-up. That's the old 3D branchy, and this is at 200%, so it's large, and it's printing really nicely. There's lots of really nice prints in this, quite smooth, and I didn't do this at a slow speed. I went just straight defaults. Yes, I've got a bit of a thing with pink at the moment because it's in the printer and I can't be bothered changing it. That's the only tiny little artifact that I've got there, and I'm kind of trying to work that out. I did have, I only used 5% fill on the, infill on this. So that causes these sorts of lines because it gives you not a great deal of support on the inside. But there's a really interesting idea. The Adventurer 4 by itself will print that as good a quality as this as well. It will just take twice as long to print it. Now, some of you at times have had issues with Z shift. Now, this is a perfect example of Z shift. Now, it's printed to a point. We can see a slight Z shift here. Here's another bit where the nozzle has just got confused at that point in the G-code file, shifted back, started printing, went up, and then this one completely moved back. You can see it's moved about 1 millimetre here, about 5 millimetres here. Up here, it's moved almost 12, 15 millimetres back from where it should be. I stopped it at that point in time and gave up. This was using basically the wrong slicing profile for the printer. That can be a very easy thing to do. And I'll show you an instance in a minute when we jump onto the screen again. I'll show you flash print and what you can do with those sorts of things. You will find that a Z shift is usually just picking the wrong G code or the wrong printer at the time. So check to make sure that when you're doing it in the bottom of flash print, you're choosing the flash print Adventurer 4, not the Pro, not the 3, not the Guide, not anything else. It's got to be the Adventurer. It's a real rookie mistake and it can mess things up. So that's where we are there with that one. Now, I will go quickly over to, let me swap back to, now I'll leave it on that camera, but what I will do is I will share my screen to show you did I get that bit done? Yep, did that, so I will get rid of that. Okay, so your flash print software, down the bottom here you will find you've got where you can get it. This is the thing about the machine type. Make sure you've got the Adventurer 4 series, not the Adventurer 4 Pro. Okay, now, print bed and stay on the print bed, right, okay, filament breaks, feeding up filament, right, okay. Here's an interesting thing that you need to look at, and I'll just give you a quick little go run down on this. Make sure you've got your object centered. It'll do that all by itself, or you can use the options in the menu on the side here. When you go to start slicing, you can stay in this particular mode here, or you can go to the expert mode. The expert mode does give you the ability to turn things off like the raft. This version of Flash Print 5 automatically puts a raft on it. I go no for something like this. Let me get out of here, because I have a nice area of blue. I've gone over this a number of times. If you've got a nice big blue area, you do not need a raft or a brim to make it fit well. So when you kick off with your slicing, and from memory and basic mode, I don't think I can turn raft off here. No, I can't. Now, to help any sort of adherence, etc., there's not a real lot that you can do within the Flash Print software. But this is one of those interesting little rookie mistakes that I have done myself. And just recently we had a school, and I still they haven't got back to me to confirm this, but they could not see the GX file when they transferred from the Flash Print software to their Flash Forge printer. What I have experienced is, one, the most simple, and I'm saying this because I've done it. I have literally not saved it to the USB drive, or if you went last week, you would simply go up here and you would send it to the network printer. This isn't networked here today, so I'm using SneakerNet. So I go to my USB drive, I will call it, this is a 3D Benchy, and I'm going to go through something right at the moment and give you a bit of a clue on what I do for naming convention. So the object here is a 3D Benchy. It'll pick that up. But what I do is this. I go Flash Forge FF ADV for Adventurer 4. I'll then throw either an underscore or a thing. Now that's telling me that what I'm doing is printing to this particular printer. Now, if you've got a few different printers in your fleet, this is hugely advantageous, because when you start putting these, if you start reusing the GX files that you've done, you want to reprint something off again, this will tell you what you've actually got here. And the next thing that I do is I will go to the end of this. You can do it in any order that you want, and I will put PLA, the type of filament that this is using, because you might be using PETG, you might be using ABS. If you don't put the type of filament, this particular printer or any printer will make a dog's breakfast of your printer. If you've got ABS, it heats it up a lot more. It'll overheat PLA. If you've got PLA here and you try to have an ABS filament in your printer, it won't get it hot enough and you'll end up with this gunk going everywhere, and it'll be actually terrible. So naming conventions is really good. So I go Flash Forge Adventurer 4 with the Pro. I'll put a Pro after that, so that then, because now that I'm testing the two of them, I want to know which one I'm going to do. And if you've got Adventurer 4s and Pros, you need to know which one. The Adventurer 4 Pro does not like the Adventurer. The Adventurer 4 Pro does not like the Adventurer 4 profiles. That's a perfect example. Z shift will happen. Now I will save this to my USB stick. I will then take that and put it in. Now, if you have by chance come down here and you're doing some testing, or you've just slipped and you've thrown it on into a different printer, you haven't picked up on it, and then you've done your slicing, etc., and you've then tried to save it with that profile, that's when you may find that you walk over to your printer, you stick it in, you won't see it. It won't come up on the screen. So it's a really, really strange one that you need to make sure that, one, you're picking the right printer, two, that you actually have downloaded it. It's real rookie, and I'm not saying that to spite anybody, because hands up here, I've done it. I've walked over and gone, where is it? And I've gone, you idiot, you haven't actually downloaded it. Because it's that step. Create your model, slice your model on flash print, download it or network send it to your printer, walk over, stick it in your USB stock, find it and print it off. But that naming convention is something that I will get you to look at. There it is. I know straight away that I've got this GX file. I can transfer that to somebody else. I can give it to them. I can post it up there and they know that it's a flash forwards adventure. Really good little habit to get into. It's the same as the way you should be looking at naming your document files. Give them meaningful names and you won't lose them and you'll know what they actually are. So that's a little cute one there. Now, I did have something else that I was going to tie in there. What time are we looking at? Okay, good. So now I want to get into, I'm going to clean a few things up here so that I can actually show you well. Right, let's get rid of that. One thing that I don't know whether I've shown you before is these. Let's go to a camera that might work and stop screen sharing. Right, okay. One thing that I may have shown you before are these rolls. These are really, really good for 1 kilo filament rolls if they need to sit outside a printer. I'm talking here Inventor 2 SE type printers or smaller printers. These are really, really good. You will find that they're just using some eBay type bearings. Can I see? You won't be able to see. There's some bearings in these rollers. If you need these files, can't remember whether I've already stuck them up or not. I will get these files and I'll stick them up for you so that you can actually print these up. There are a bunch of these sitting up on Thingiverse or Yegi or any of the free download, but a really good way of getting it. It does need to have ball bearings because this needs to roll really easily and not have any resistance, which is one of the things. Now, one of the things in the setup that I showed you here before in the list was filaments that break. If you've got filaments that's breaking and just cracking and very easily becoming very, very brittle, what's happening with your filament is your filament has absorbed too much water, which goes against the grain. I've mentioned this a couple of times. You need to, one, either use your filament a lot quicker, and in school situations, I would expect you would use your filament before it would get to that, but schools have got a very humid environment. You don't all have air conditioning, etc. So you will find that your filaments may get brittle. If they get brittle, put them in an oven for about 2 hours. There's some interesting articles sitting on 3D printers, tips and tricks, etc. At about 100, I wouldn't go over 100 degrees, maybe 120 degrees. And what that does is it tends to get rid of the water and you will find you'll get some flexibility back in your filaments. So be very, very careful with that. Now, why I'm doing that is that then leads to the situation of if you've got your Adventurer 4, and remember it's got this feeder tube going up here. Oh, I did that quite well, almost. And that has got the filament in it. I'm going to go through 2 stages now to show you some solutions to what has happened with a couple of schools that I've got them fixed up and working. When one, the filament was feeding, but it was just going off into the ether and they couldn't find it. And I've had that happen to me twice on these machines. And it's a really weird situation because it's feeding, but it's not coming out anywhere. And the other one is if it breaks and where it breaks. So how do we fix those things? So this is the real technical end of what we're going to play with today. So what we have is the filament coming from the side here, going through the Bowden tube and ending up here. The drive mechanism is on the side. I'm going to get to how you would fix that in a minute. Well, not quite a minute, it'll take us about 10 minutes. Here we have a situation where if I'm trying to feed the filament into this and it's not coming out the end, but I can see it here, where's it going? And it feels like it's still moving when I put my finger up on the filament at the feed side here. So what's happening? Interesting thing, this has happened with printers that have just arrived in a school and they're going, what's going on? Now, the interesting thing is what I have deduced, but not 100% confirmed, but it's the only thing that makes sense is that the hot end in here is not seated correctly and it's sitting at a slight angle. Now, if it's sitting at a slight angle and it's supposed to be here, the filament will come in and be able to get into the hole or the little funnel at the top of the hot end. Oh, goody, we can show you. Okay, so here we've got our hot end. You've got the hole in here. The filament will come in and it's got to go into that hole. Now, if it is sitting slightly ajar because one side of the, where are we? One side hasn't been seated properly because it's either moved. I actually replicated this by trying to remove the hot end while the filament was still in there. And I just jiggled it enough to put it out of line. So it was sitting at a slight angle. And then when I tried to feed the filament in, it came out, but it didn't go anywhere. I'm wondering, where is this? What's going on? And it was the experience that this school was having as well, was that the filament looks like it's feeding, but it's just not going anywhere. So what I had to do was simply remove the hot end and then reintroduce it back in and make sure that it clicked in vertically. Now, it does it automatically, and it only has to be out by a tiny amount, and you will find that it can muck up your feed. So that's one of the things you need to be aware of. If you end up being in a position where you have to actually really test it, there are a few things that you can do. So what I'm going to do now is go in and, where are we? Maintenance. I don't want to do that. I want to go into prepare filament, and I'm going to change the filament. So I'm going to pull that filament out and get it out of the system. Then I'm going to actually take out the hot end, and I'm going to show you a cute little thing. I'm going to actually move this down a little bit so you can see what's going on a little bit better. One of the things that you can do if you have trouble with your filament getting stuck, what I'm going to do is wait for this to come out. I'm actually going to turn the printer off when I see the filament, and I'm using pink so I can actually see it coming out. Or orange in this case. Right, okay, I'm going to turn the printer off. Now, the printer is turned off. The filament is about halfway down the Bowden tube. And I'm now going to turn it back on so I can put the print head down so that you can see what's going on. But in this situation here, it's quite hot, but I've got asbestos fingers so that I can actually do it. If I dive in, I can actually pull that print. Now it's out. It'll have a little dummy spin. It doesn't like things. That'll come out. Now, if I put that in, or if I half pull that out with the filament in, it would sit, I'm going to get an error up now. It'll sit at a strange angle, which is exactly what I don't want it to do, because it'll muck up that feed mechanism. Now, let me get in and see if I can actually move it around. Yep. And I want to move it down. At the top of the print head, there is a little, put you up the top here. There is a little, what do we call it? It's actually a pneumatic, because a pneumatic coupler. It's this brass thing, and with the Adventure of 4 in your toolkit, there you go, you will find that you get these little brass, or they might be stainless steel. Now, these have got a little mechanism in them that allows you to push in the Bowden tube and it locks it into place. And you can be in a situation where you might have to take this out. Now, this is last resort type stuff, so let me get this zoomed in for you a little bit. And I'll readjust this. And it is going to be a little bit difficult to see. What you need to do is that you can push down or pull up. Pull up. You pull up the little brass ring, and that will allow you, let me get in and do it. That will allow you to, right, now you push it down. That'll let you get the Bowden tube out. Now, where did I put it? Oh, I'll put it back, didn't I? So that screws into the top of the feed, and then I have to push this in, and you've got to push it in with a little bit of force. And then it will actually lock into place and allow me to feed it. Now, what you can do when you've got your print head in place here, when you've got the nozzle in place, you can just get some filament and you can push it through after you've preheated the head, and you can push it through just to see if it's lining up. It's one of those things that sometimes you've got to do a little bit of problem solving, and most of you on this particular side or listening are really good problem solvers. So what I do is that I just get a little bit of filament, crack it off, and I will throw it through so that I can just go, yep, it's going through nicely. I'm happy with that. Come on, break. Right. So here I'll have a little bit of filament. I can now push that filament through this part of the nozzle and just see if it's actually going through the mechanism and the system. Now, if I've got the nozzle in there, it will confirm that I'm right, and I can actually put a little bit of pressure on it, and it'll actually feed if I've got the nozzle heated up. That's not going to work at the moment because it's throwing an error for that. If you do take this off, I'm not going to go through that process of pushing it through. We're limited on time. I'm now going to put the Bowden tube back in. You do have to push it down with a little bit of force, making sure that it bottoms out inside this receptor here. Give it a nice good push, it should be down. When you pull on it, it shouldn't be able to come out because there is a degree of pressure with the filament as it comes through in this instance. Now I'm going to also now put the tube back in. You will find you've always got to be able to see the nozzle size and the temperature when you're putting it in. And I squeeze both sides and then push it in and then give it a little pull down. And if it pops on you if you pull it down, you haven't seated it properly and it could be sitting at an angle and you'll have that filament issue. Like, it happens rarely, but it's just weird that it does. Now, the next thing that you may find, and this is a very, very rare one. Let me spin this around now and get the angle up. Sometimes, where are we? Go up. Right. Okay. Sometimes you will get some problems up in this area here where the filament's gone in and it breaks inside the feed mechanism. You can easily take the little guard off here just by grabbing it and giving it a little pull out. This will get you into the feed mechanism so you can see exactly what's going on. Now, it does have the ability, if I grab that, it'll be a little bit awkward for me to get in there. Let me get in there this way. I can actually pull that up and now that will release, or it should release. Yep, and now I can pull the filament out manually. It also allows me, if I pull it up, to feed the filament in manually as well. Don't do that with this one. Let the feed mechanism do it all. But it also gives you a bit of a better insight as to how this is working when I slot it in, and it will sit there. Now, if you can, yeah, you can see nicely. You should be able to see that quite well. Let me just adjust this a little bit better. Okay. Let me zoom in just a whisker more. Okay, and focus. Right, so let me use my filament pointer. Okay, so this little wheel here is the drive mechanism, and the filament is going up alongside it, and it's got a little idler roller here, and this is turning with a motor behind it and squeezing and pushing the filament up through the Bowden tube and then down into your printer head nozzle. This is the tensioner on here that will allow you to actually release the tension of the feed roller. That's the big silver one that you can see up against the idler wheel, and gives it the friction to be able to feed it in. Now, I have only once had to do this where what happened was the filament broke inside here and it was blocking the passage of new filament through the system. Real pain it was to be able to get it out. And it had blocked it so badly because I had used, here we go, old filament that was too moist and was extremely brittle, and it had snapped off because there was enough pressure on the wheel to start shattering the filament within the feed mechanism. And because it's got a Bowden feed, it started leaving remnants inside the tube. Now, the Adventurer 4 Bowden tube, as I have alluded to before, is surprisingly tolerant of broken filament inside the tube and seems to be able to feed it through. But if they're short little pieces, you will have problems at the print head end. So try to avoid it. I have had to take one of these apart once because I simply could not get into it. but from memory, there should be a little pair of tweezers, or if you get a pair of tweezers, you should be able to get most, if not all, of your filament out of the mechanism when it's caught in here. And it seems to get caught in this little section here. Another trick is you can actually tip it over, blow it out, try and get any filament that breaks in this section out before you have to pull it apart. Getting this back in is a real gymnastics exercise. It fits in rather strange. So as you're pulling it apart, note how you're doing if you ever have to get there. There are 2 screws, one there and one there for memory. They are the 2 that you pull out, and then you can get it out and then get rid of all the mess that's inside it. It's relatively simple and it's not too difficult to pull apart and put back together again, but have a little bit of a skill set if you're ever going to play with this in terms of a bit of confidence more than anything is what I'm saying there. I've only had to do it once because I really did something dumb and stupid. We'll all do that at some point in time. But try and avoid taking this a bit apart. The little tube in the print head is relatively simple, gives you a bit of an idea of what's going on. And that'll get you going. But again, I can pull that up, pull out my filament, gives me the ability to actually have a degree of control over this mechanism and the filament that's inside it. To put this back in, you simply set it up, give it a push, and it'll drop back in nicely. I'll set that up, ready to go. I've now got to actually reset the printer so that it knows that it's got the right filament head in there. Because once you remove a filament head, you will find that it will not automatically detect it. It needs to actually, where am I? Let me pull it over there. So I'll just go through this one again because it's one of the things that I find is really easy to muck up. Now that I've gone through and I've changed the print head nozzle, I now need to go in and make sure that I've got my settings and I've gone into, wrong one, is it maintain? Yep. Go into maintenance and change extruder. Make sure that it's selecting the 0.4 240, which is the one I've got in there. There is 0.6 and 0.8, and there's 240 and 265. So the 2 that you get with the machine are the 240 and the 265. 265 is for PETG and ABS. This is the one that you'll be using most of the time. Go next and then complete. Don't worry about Z height. It should get fixed up with your print leveling. Once you've got that in, we then simply need to go through. You may decide to calibrate. I would. And then we prepare it by doing the filament, and we're going to load the filament. It'll ask you, have you actually removed the filament? I have. I've got it sitting here ready to go. That'll pick up the filament, move it into the head. So the 2 things that I've just shown you are the issues with filament getting caught and some possible maintenance. As for anything major with pulling this printer apart, I have not had to do anything related to pulling this printer apart in any way, shape or form. The Inventor required some major surgery at times. This one is much better in that respect. There's very little you've had to do. I've never had to take the print head itself apart. Where are we? Now this is next. That's feeding in nicely now. That'll come through. Hopefully I've got the print head nozzle in nicely. We'll wait a little bit and that'll start to come out. But I've never had to do anything with the actual print head itself. So it's really good in that respect, because I was getting to the stage where I was constantly pulling the little Inventor apart for myself and for schools. Now, it does feed it through. It's just coming up to the head now, and when you've got coloured filament in there, you can see it through the Bowden tube. It does make it nicer. And then once it gets there, it'll heat it up. It's already up to temperature, and it'll start to feed. Give it a little bit of a time to purge it through. This will be interesting if it actually doesn't come out, and then I can show you how we fix it. But it should come out in a minute. Come on. Just remember that the guide we went through, when it says complete, wait for it to complete before you actually press the button complete.
Greg, just letting you know you're about 4:15.
Ah, good, yeah, no, I'm about to wrap up, so it's perfect timing today. There we go. So that filament's coming through, let it come out, let it create a little pool at the bottom down here. I'll wire that out. So we're getting a nice little pool of filament down the bottom. I wouldn't do huge amounts of that. It's a good idea. Again, I have said at times, if you're going to start using some exotic filaments like the wood-based filaments, really be careful. Now you can go complete because it's got through the process of bringing it out. Grab that. You've got some little fishing line that you can go fishing with. That'd be interesting to see whether it'll work. I don't think it would. And you're ready to start printing. Next thing I would do, I'd do the print leveling. Make sure that when you're using the little guide, you just fill the tiniest amount of resistance. That will stop those possible problems where your print objects are sticking too well. So give yourself that chance to get the leveling right. I think that's about a wrap. Let me just have a quick check and make sure I've gone through everything. Print bed leveling, I've explained that. Model off the print bed, yep. We've done the cleaning of the print bed, yes. Did we do cleaning of the print bed? Yes, I did cleaning of the print bed. Doesn't stay on the bed, went through that bunch of spaghettis. Bubbles on the surface, that's an interesting one. If you're experiencing, let's change cameras. If you're experiencing bubbling on the side of your print object, so for example, you would have this and it would start to show little bubbles on the side. What that is again, moisture in your filament, and the water in the filament is actually boiling because these things are over 200 degrees Celsius. So it's boiling and causing those little bubbles. Some contaminant or very, very cheap, and I will state Chinese type filaments that are coming out there. There are some super cheap ones which are very tempting, but they've got a lot of impurities in them. I would stay away from those using them in a school situation simply because we don't want those fumes in a classroom. These do have HEPA filters in them, but they're not getting rid of absolutely everything, and you would like to know what is in those particular filaments, so be aware of that one. Pitch breaking we've done. Can't see the models we did. The filament not feeding. Right, we've basically done everything with those little gremlins that just what's going wrong with my printer and why isn't printing. Hopefully we've covered as many of those as we can. And I'll just open it up quickly for anybody who wants to throw something in the chat for any questions that I might want to, that we can answer. Anyone quickly with anything? Nobody's thrown anything at the moment in, so...
Or if you've got a mic, turn it on and talk.
Yeah, turn your mic on and have a chat with us is the other way to do it as well. It makes it easier. We've got our three usual suspects that are coming back in. David.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, good, good. Yourself?
Good, thanks, mate. Good, real good. I've had a little trouble with printing out the collapsible sword.
Yep.
And it prints out fine, gets to the end of it, but then I have trouble trying to make it expand or...
Yep.
Yeah. And I was wondering if I needed to change some settings maybe somewhere in it.
Settings mostly not. I haven't printed one, or have I? Yeah, I have printed some off in the Adventurer 4, a lot of them up there. I did find, which filament, is it the filament that came with the Adventurer 4?
Yeah, I've used that one. I did it twice with that one, and then I've put a different one in a red, a kilo, or one I bought just recently, and it did the same sort of thing.
Now, this is going to sound super weird. I do find that different coloured filaments, which is really strange, don't work as well as others. I have got a couple of those swords upstairs that I have not been able to crack apart and get them to actually work. And the filament was older filament. It should be working with this, but I do find that the Bilby, the cheap Bilby 3D printing stuff does work really, really nicely and gives me a nice print. There, you do have to get in and crack them apart. I've actually gone down and used, would you believe, feeler gauges just to clean out any of the little dags. What can happen is that you get spidering across between the telescope parts.
Yep.
And that will stick it and make it almost impossible to go down. To avoid that, you could get in and play with the fan settings. And to do that, I would increase the fan speed.
Right. Okay. Yep.
That would be something that might help any tiny little bits of spidering. I haven't had a huge experience with the filament that's come with the machine. I've only got one spool of it, and it's printed reasonably well. I will go up and grab it, and I'll throw a saw through it, and I'll see what's going on, and I'll get back to you.
Awesome, mate. Thank you.
What's the best temp to cook a roll of filament if it's old? I think you're looking at about 100 to 120 degrees. I do not go, and it's a couple of hours. There's a number of how-tos on on Google it out, and it'll give you those temperatures. Most of those say about 150. I wouldn't be going that high, but just a basic oven. Try and do it when the wife's out. And you can throw it in, or if you've got something, or the home ec department lets you use the oven.
Also, check the difference between Celsius and Fahrenheit.
We're all Celsius. We've got to be all Celsius.
No, but if you're looking at a US site, for example, that gives you advice.
Yes. The Americans are slowly moving to metric, but oh my God, there's some fun things on YouTube on metric and imperial. So it's very interesting. Any other questions? Hope that covers it there, Rob. Your mic's not turning off for you. Okay then, guys. All right. We'll catch up. For those people who are watching this post recording, I hope it's answered a few of your questions, given you a few tools to keep your printers running nicely. We won't be back until week 2 of term 4. So have a good break, you guys, and we'll see you all then. Thank you. Bye-bye.